Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and today we're on vacation. So what you're going to hear today on the feed is an interview I gave with Skift CEO Rafat Ali on his podcast, the Skift Travel Podcast. And what we discussed was a lot of fun. So we pontificated on what we think is next for Airbnb. And as they move into 2025 and 2026, what do I think that, and what have we heard Airbnb talk about, that they could launch to create their next billion-dollar business? So I hope you really enjoyed this episode from Skift.
Hey, Jamie, welcome to the Skift podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, you are a repeat guest. You were there the first Sarah and Seth podcast. You were the first guest. I think it was a few months ago when they started their podcast. So you're pretty quickly back, and obviously there's a good reason why. You've been at AirDNA since the start, correct?
No, I joined AirDNA in October of 2020. But I was sort of there from the start, being one of the, if not the first customer of AirDNA while I was at CBRE, sort of running hotel research there.
Okay, so we're going to talk today about what Airbnb's founder, Brian Chesky, co-founder, first described to me at Skift Global Forum in September when I interviewed him. And he said, we want to move beyond our core, which he's been saying for a while. But the first time he said a little more concretely that he wants to create one or two new businesses for Airbnb beyond the core of accommodations, and 1 to 2 every year, which will be $1 billion each type businesses. And the reason I wanted to talk to you is literally the name of your company is AirDNA. So you live, breathe, and think Airbnb in the larger short-term rental world. And have obviously thought and written and all the work that you do as the chief economist for AirDNA is to think about this sector deeply as well. So I figured you're the best person to talk about what's driving Brian's thinking in this, Airbnb's overall thinking in this. What could those new lines of business be? And if there are any abstractions to make on it, is there a thread that the company is trying to piece through in this expansion thought process that they have? And you wrote on LinkedIn and Twitter some ideas on potential next businesses for them. So we'll go through some of them and we'll discuss them more in depth. So that's the context of our conversation. What do you think? Airbnb just reported its earnings, so we have a good sense of what the state of the company as we speak now. What do you think is driving this thinking on Airbnb's part? Obviously, it's a very large company. It's now profitable as a business, throwing out a lot of free cash flow. What does this say about Airbnb, and what does this say about the short-term rental sector?
Yeah, and clearly, and the short-term rental industry is starting to mature. And we've had a decade of growth. And you look back at Airbnb in 2015, 2016, 2017, when AirDNA was just getting going, and their business was doubling every year. And as it's grown, it's gotten harder to continue to grow at those high growth rates. And I think a lot of their valuation is predicated on continuing to grow. And now as the core business begins to mature, and Brian's talked about, and all the countries that they're mature in. So yes, they can continue to grow international. But I think a big part of their growth story going forward is going to be what additional business lines can they continue to add into Airbnb to sort of maintain the high multiple that they have on their stock. And I think from their vantage, and Skift puts out the report on the 250 largest short-term rental businesses sort of built in this ecosystem, that there's this entire ecosystem, and of which AirDNA is one of them, that has been built around a sector that they've really pioneered. So is there ability for them to monetize this ecosystem by offering services to hosts, to guests, that is really built up around the business.
And the post that you wrote there, it's unclear because he's been obviously, and he talked about it with me, but also on the earnings call and a couple of other interviews since. It seems as unclear whether these will be in the larger travel or outside of travel. He did mention in the earnings call that the first one that they will relaunch in May 2025 will be the new version of experiences. So this is the experiences that they've had for many years, and fits and starts and close and restart again. Looks like that whole retooling ends, what is it now, November. So I guess 6 months away. And so, because they do these releases in summer and fall where the new announcements come. So what's your sense of staying, one, within the accommodation space, two, in the larger travel, three, outside of travel?
Yeah, and clearly, and they probably will and should, and start with travel and start with specifically short-term rentals and additional things that can offer guests that are already staying in an Airbnb. So they announced this year the co-hosting network, and I think this is going to be huge because this is their first test of can they offer services to hosts that are already in their platform. So listing setup, pricing, guest communications, cleaning, all the things that you need as a host, that you can find someone to perform that task for you, whether it's cleaning your unit, whether it's helping you price that unit, set it up, furnish it, design it, and offer those services right now for free. And then I assume at some point, take a cut of sort of making that connection between
Well, the co-host thing is
service professional and host.
I think I missed that part. So the co-host thing for now is free?
The co-host thing is, Airbnb is not taking any cut of sort of connecting the host with the co-host.
Okay, so they'll make money on the other end of like having more hosts obviously makes them more money.
Yeah, but you would think, and eventually, like co-hosts will pay for these leads. They'll, and Airbnb will be able to take a cut, I think, in the future of these connections that they're making and of the services that these co-hosts will be offering. And that will be able to expand. Like, I don't think that's 2025, but I think their ability to offer more and more things to homeowners, like, and think of all the things you might need to get done at your house. You want to do a renovation. You might want to get your roof replaced. You might want to add a patio. You need any number of services at your house that aren't directly related to travel, or your ability to just grow your business and maybe finance that through future earnings.
Do you think as a public, I mean, this is, I guess, a question that I'm sure Wall Street analysts are asking, like, what's the ability and tolerance of being, one, they're public companies, so the long-term investments generally are hard. I guess it's Brian's force of personality, a bit like he models himself with Steve Jobs type person of this era, gives him the license to do this.
Yeah. And I think they've got eyeballs. They have the people on their platform. And it's a great and sort of test, I think, in 2025 when they launch Experience, because that moves the services platform from hosts who are deeply involved in the platform and significant income is sort of being generated off being on Airbnb. So like making it work with hosts seems like and as easy a bet as you could possibly make. And the next one will be, and can they offer services to guests? So are guests willing to book experiences through Airbnb and do it in a meaningful way? Are you willing to book in-unit chefs or in-unit massages or have bike rentals drop off at your vacation rental and do that through Airbnb? I think that's the next phase of all the things that they can be offering to guests and have that bookable through the Airbnb platform.
How much of credit should we put into the $1 billion number that he's given? Is that just that seems like specific, but not really. And that just seems like an internal rallying cry to me than anything else, or just signaling to the market that there's tons of growth left.
Yeah, I think that signals that he wants them to be big bets and he wants them to be monetizable. So if you're internal at Airbnb coming up with ideas, like don't bring something to him that can't scale to $1 billion business. and don't bring something to him that they're not going to be able to eventually monetize in the future. And I'm sure that that is a great sort of filtering mechanism of what they want to put their focus on. As you think back pre-pandemic of all the different sort of bets Airbnb was making, business lines, they had their magazine, they were thinking about getting into flights, they were going in a lot of different directions. But how many of those were actually going to be billion-dollar businesses? Probably pretty few of them. So, and they sort of cut back, they focus on the core. Now as they look to expand the business going forward, of putting a very tight filter of what they want to spend their time and effort on.
He also talked about both with me in the interview, but also more specifically in the earnings call about Amazon as the example he gives of like started with books, and books was only a Trojan horse to much larger businesses. And so how far can we stretch that parallel, you think, because, Amazon now is, personally as a consumer, it's unusable. Like everything is an ad. But that's just me personally. The convenience trumps everything else in there, fortunately and unfortunately, but just the experience sucks today. And it's like we almost hate shop on Amazon because you just don't have, they're so good at quick delivery and getting you instant things. What's your sense of how we should think about Amazon as an example that he talks about?
Yeah, I think Amazon is the perfect example to be thinking about going forward. I think there's a reason why Brian talks about it so often. So the first thing I would expect sort of the Amazon example to come into is in the terms of loyalty play. Because Brian's been very clear that he wants to do an Amazon type loyalty program and not a Marriott Bonvoy type loyalty program. So it's not something where you're going to be earning and burning points. It's going to be something where, like Amazon Prime, where you pay money to be part of that program. And then as a member of that program, you're going to get substantial benefits that enhances your life, and where you think like, how did I live without Amazon Prime? How did I live without Airbnb's rewards program while I'm traveling? And can they build that is a question, but that's clearly the direction Brian wants to go.
Has anybody built that well in travel?
I don't think so. I don't think outside of the brands, anyone's done loyalty well. So I don't think we've seen the OTAs have a real successful loyalty program in the past. Like, yes, Marriott, yes, Delta, big brands within the travel space where they and clearly like have the inventory, as opposed to the OTAs trying to build a loyalty program on top of inventory that they don't really control. So Airbnb is sort of that mix of brand and OTA, because most of the hosts on Airbnb are unique to the Airbnb platform. So that does give them a whole lot more control where they could do a loyalty program. But as Brian said, like they don't need to. And they have guests coming back over and over and exclusively using their platform. They have their super users. They don't need a loyalty program to keep their customers loyal. So what can they add in addition that would make those really loyal users be willing to pay more and get more and sort of stay deep inside the Airbnb platform? Because yeah, I have Amazon Prime. If I need something, I'm just ordering it on Amazon. Even though my wife now tells me we shouldn't be, I'm still going to do it just because it's so freaking convenient.
Yeah, by the way, my wife's the same way. She swore off Amazon a few years ago, and now she goes through so many hoops to order from Walmart or this or that. I said, like, oh my God, why? Like, she ideologically opposes Amazon and now will not order through Amazon. And like at some point, I have to take over and say, I'll just order it for you. And then something happens similar to you. Anyway, so let's run through this list that you wrote. I think some we already talked about. Monetizing services and assets is the first one that you hosting, co-hosting. We already talked about that. Enhancing guest experience. You hinted a little bit. Just talk about what you mean by that. It's in, I guess, in property services, like in unit massages, private chefs, mid-stay cleaning, grocery delivery, equipment rental.
Yeah. And we've got this marketplace now launched for hosts, the co-hosting network. And so 2025 is clearly going to be the move into services for guests. And that's going to launch first with experiences. And we already got a preview. I think it was yesterday. Brian our Airbnb released it that they're going to do this gladiator experience in the Coliseum for that, and essentially an icon experience. And we've seen it with the rest of the icons too. But this is not necessarily a stay, but it's something you can go and do in the Coliseum. So they're going to have some big, I think, launches around experiences. And experiences is going to be the first foray into all the things that guests can book while in market. I think they have to do something different with experiences because they've tried and largely failed to really scale experiences to be a meaningful part of the business. To be fair, COVID had a big impact on that, where they had done a mid-roll launch, they had some traction going with it, and then they had to pull it back pretty extensively. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to do differently with experiences. But I think part of that is going to be all the other things that they can also offer to guests while they're staying in a property, and also offer to locals. And all these things that an Airbnb guest might want are also something that a homeowner or someone living in a market might want as well. And that's where their ability to scale really changes. Is like with short-term rentals, and the fact that they were able to move into long-term rentals and midterm rentals was a big unlock of potential value for the platform. So if they can be successful at launching to travelers within the market, like great. If they can successfully launch into doing grocery delivery for people that live in that market, that really expands the opportunity for them to grow.
Yeah, that's fascinating because, by the way, where I'm recording this podcast from, I'm in Morocco and sitting in an Airbnb that we booked for a month. So like literally we are, and I think it looks like you're sitting in an Airbnb as well, or at least a short-term rental.
Yeah, no, this is my Airbnb that I rent out. I bought it earlier this year. So using it with some friends this weekend, but yeah, it's, I'm not allowing month-long stays, but the trend in month-long stays that we've been tracking at AirDNA has just been unbelievable, in how so many investors now actually prefer midterm rentals as a business model and 30 plus day longer stays. And it really is a huge unlock for Airbnb, and something that they're really competing with, like a Zillow or a Zumper of long-term rental companies wanting to get into midterm rentals, Airbnb coming in from the short-term rental, trying to push into midterm rentals. I don't think yet we know who's going to own that space long-term. It's really still up for grabs.
What are the I mean, I guess is the term unit not like what works better for Airbnb and the investors, the short term or this medium term thing or long term thing?
I think it's a great hedge for Airbnb that they have it, especially with regulation popping up in many markets. Like Airbnb still has, it's like 20,000 listings in New York that are midterm rentals. Like, yeah, Airbnb is banned in New York, but they still have a significant presence, just not for short-term stays. So it does provide other options around regulatory risk. And really, like in cities, the way people live has just been changing. And people don't want always have to take a year-long lease to stay in the market that they're working in, and maybe only temporarily. And Airbnb in many ways can solve that problem. And what I love with this is that Airbnb has taken the demand that they see happening on the platform already and tried to really recraft their product to fit that demand. So doing different ways to pay, where you can do ACH and not have to pay a credit card fee for your long-term stay, of doing monthly payments. So you can do a 3-month stay and pay each month and not have to pay the whole thing up front. And really recrafting their platform as opposed to building their platform and then trying to sort of force the demand into what they built.
Yeah, and also the split between, like, if something place not available, you stay in this one, and then nearby you can stay another one for another 15 days. Let's say if you're doing a whole month and it's only available. Okay, let's continue down the list. Exploring new markets could venture into facilitating car, boat, and even plane rentals for guests or home improvement services, installing hot tubs, pools, solar panels. It's interesting. There are companies that do exist in many of these startups. If you remember, were initially pitched as Airbnb of this. We use, as a family, use Swimply quite a bit because they do swimming pools. I live in New York City, don't have obviously a swimming pool in our house. So we use Swimply in summer many times. And Swimply itself has expanded beyond swimming pools into like tennis courts and other like adjacent things as well. So talk a little bit about these Airbnb of type startups or companies that have emerged that could potentially be for them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they see. So if they're able to successfully launch and sort of the services for guests, this is the next iteration of that. So I do think moving outside of travel is predicated on them sort of being successful in travel services. But if they do sort of make that happen, then it sort of opens up the aperture. They sort of have the right to, I think, move into these adjacent spaces of what are all the things else that we can do there. And yeah, it gets into the Airbnb for cars and the Airbnb for planes and the Airbnb for and tools, whatever it is, like that they could try to monetize those other assets that people have that are underutilized and the business models have already been written. I think some have done really well, some haven't. I think for most of the companies that maybe haven't been successful, it's all around customer acquisition. So how can they get more people to know about that? And it hasn't failed in the past, maybe where it would be successful is through Airbnb with the sort of audience that they've already built up.
A couple of questions on that. So one, do you think they will do this organically versus buying some of these companies? There's Turo on the cars, Swimply, BabyQuip on like travel equipment type rental, a bunch of other companies. Many of these folks we know because they're in and around travel industry per se. Or do you think they'll build it themselves?
Yeah, I think, and Brian said that, and he really wants to build it organically. I think they'll try to build it organically, and if they fail, then maybe they'll make acquisitions. But I think for them, and one, they've got a huge sort of cash war chest. So if they want to go out and start making acquisitions, they can. I think they really like the culture that they've built. I think they've liked how they have the company structured, and by making large acquisitions, that could put that into and question. And you saw the pain that Expedia had to go through with and Priceline and all the acquisitions they made and the years it took to sort of integrate them in. And I don't think they want to do that. I think they want to build them organically the right way and not have to do these massive integration projects because it just slows them down. But in terms of getting into new business lines, and if they're not able to do it organically, like an acquisition is clearly a way that it could accelerate their foray into these adjacent sectors.
And the second question is, I guess what one of the things Airbnb is betting on is the trust that they've built into the system versus, when I first was using Swimply, I had no idea whether what they're promising will be there, right? And they're obviously a much smaller company. Who knows, venture funded, their money will run out, who knows, whatever it is. They are betting that the trust people have built into the system both ways, because it's a two-sided marketplace, and that they have built systems around it, customer service, privacy, safety, tech, will play a huge role in these new adjacencies outside of travel or even within travel.
Yeah, and that's why, and I think they're going to succeed at this because they've already solved all the hard parts of trust. And all the guests have a profile. In that profile, they've built out a long history of like staying in someone's home and getting good reviews from that person that was hosting them. The hosts have a long history of hosting and people saying good things about their properties and what they're doing. So that trust factor, I don't think can be underestimated in its ability to sort of drive outside growth for Airbnb. And what surprises me that other companies and sort of in the travel space haven't leaned into that trust factor. Like Vrbo's never made reviews a big part of their platform, and I still can't leave comments on hosts that I want to just say whether our host can't leave comments on guests. And as a host, like, I want to see what other hosts say about the guests before I allow this stranger into my home, especially and ones that would have had maybe a few lower star reviews and the impact that they could have. So the fact that they already have it and there's hundreds of millions of reviews that have been left on the Airbnb platform, that gives them a really big head start.
Yeah, by the way, I've booked many dozens of Airbnbs over the years. I've never booked on Vrbo because of the reviews. Like, I just cannot have a sense of, yes, they claim they're more professional photos, city, whatever. It's Expedia, so I do trust, like, they're definitely, if something goes wrong, I can figure out a way to get help if I need to. But it's just that two-way trust that they've built, which I think people underestimate, and large corporations, which with legacy underestimate that they've done, which I think is very interesting. We talked about a loyalty program. We talked about that. Building physical, social. Well, actually, let's continue to think about this. Travel plan. Discounted part of the members. You write in this that Prime, like an Amazon Prime, for annual fees, members could enjoy benefits like discounted fees, concierge services, traveling planning assistance, gym memberships, or co-working space access. I do find the last two, gym membership and co-working, actually very useful, particularly for medium-term stays or medium to long-term stays. I mean, literally, here in Morocco, I needed a gym access. I had to go get a month's thing separately, language issues and stuff. So it took me a little bit of hurdle. But if it was through Airbnb network, and co-working the same way, I mean, it just so happens like I'm working from this place, but people may want co-working access. Seems like such a no-brainer that will have, from a conversion perspective, seems like, at least on paper, will work very well.
Yeah, and that's where, and if they can make this loyalty program something that, like, how did I travel without it before? It then becomes a no-brainer for people that travel regularly, and I travel very regularly for both business and leisure, that I'd be able to take advantage of it, just like with Amazon Prime. So if they can find that value and find the right partners, and unfortunately, like, it's got to be global. And yes, maybe they could do just the US or they could do just France where they have a lot of domestic travel. Like, maybe they could make that work, but ideally the benefits would expand globally if they could figure it out.
Yeah, and I guess they'll have to build supply in each of these categories in a big way. And I think some of it, they're betting that instead of the human heavy part of it, meaning humans doing deals to build supply, one, they have a platform, two, AI in whatever form will speed up building the supply more than Airbnb from 10 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah. I was just going to say on the next one, like, their ability, like, if they've built out this platform, now they've got the ability to monetize it through ads like they've never done before. And if you listen to earnings calls, analysts ask them almost every single time, like, when are you going to do sort of promoted listings, like where a host can pay to get their listing higher up on the search? Like, if you're offering services to guests, like, how could you make those services like the sponsored listing that they'd be able to pay for? And what I think Airbnb has already started doing around the profiles and having both hosts and guests really build out detailed profiles is taking one step further that Amazon hasn't done. And Amazon has your purchase history, which makes it pretty easy for them to serve you ads. But you go to Facebook, where they've got this massive profile, all your friends, all your connections. Like, if Airbnb is able to have these sort of detailed profiles as well, along with your travel history, I think that's going to make it and give them the ability to really serve you both listings, destinations, and services while you're in that destination that could help them really monetize that. And you look at a Facebook, like, almost all their revenue is generated by ads. So this could be huge if they're able to do ads in the right way, do promoted listings in the right way, And what Brian said is that he's not going to do it unless he can do it in a way that where it's not going to hurt hosts. And you look at in the past, like how Vrbo did it, like essentially just gave professional hosts a way to pay to get their listings first. Individual hosts never really figured out the platform of like doing the ads and like paying to get higher up. And it was a huge return that they were able to get from it, the professional hosts. So they all did it. And it really made it a professional host platform. And no, Airbnb does not want that to happen. So if they can figure out a way to do promoted listings in a way that's not going to really promote professional hosts too much, I think they'll do it. But that's going to be a really hard nut to crack and a pretty good reason why they've delayed so long.
Yeah, and obviously this is so accretive to the bottom line that and to the stock, obviously, that's why he gets all these questions. And every example we've seen of large companies introducing ad listings and it becoming such an addictive drug, and like Netflix has suddenly billions of dollars of new business as a result of ads coming in. Amazon, we know the example. All of these platforms that have introduced ads have suddenly become very large and take money away from media companies and publishers, etc. And so I just don't see how they don't do it, whether it's in the next year, 2 years. The pressures of growth at some point will take over.
And maybe they start with co-hosts. So if they're worried about the sort of impact of professionals on guests and which listings show up, and they've launched this co-host network, maybe if you want to show up top, you're willing to pay, and they're going to take a percent of that, and that's one way they solve it, or at least test it first. But yeah, it is coming eventually. I think they're going to figure it out, but I don't expect that in 2025.
Yeah, I think introduce B2B first and before go to B2C. I think that's the way to go. Let's talk through this building physical social networks. It's a thing so one of the things Brian Chesky has talked about is loneliness and how people, he's talked quite a few times with me in interviews and many other places. I think part of it is he's also projecting some of his own insecurities and his own personal life as well. And he talks about particularly during COVID and how societies have become more lonely and Airbnb's role in that. So talk about how you're thinking about that.
Yeah. And I go back to the sort of founding of Airbnb. I was a member host on Couchsurfing, and Airbnb was sort of the monetization of Couchsurfing. And in Couchsurfing as well, there was this huge community sort of built around each city, and where there was locals that sort of hosted all these Couchsurfing meetups for travelers that were coming to that destination. So any city in the world that you're traveling to, there was going to be a Couchsurfing meetup happening where you had locals sort of showing travelers where to go, what to do, where the fun bars were, and none of that was really monetized. And I see, and there's this huge opportunity of all this travel happening, not a lot of interconnection between locals and travelers, and that when you're in a market, there's all these travelers and there's no way for them to really find and meet up with each other. Like, yeah, you could book an Airbnb experience. Like my wife and I were just down in Colombia a couple of weeks ago. We booked a Airbnb experience to do a beer tour and met all these other people. And it was like a great social interaction. And those are happening all over the world through the experiences. And so can Airbnb sort of build upon that and scale that so that there could be meetups happening, Airbnb meetups of locals and travelers happening in every city around the world every week that give, like you in Morocco, like, hey, I'd love to go meet other people, a mix of both travelers and locals in this market, and know like I can just show up at this bar at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday and there's going to be a whole lot of people that are looking to meet and chat. Like that could really enhance the sort of guest experience. And there's the bars that would be and restaurants that'd be willing to host all these travelers, pay to be the official bar for Airbnb in that market. So I do think it's monetizable. I do think it's something that people would really want. I've seen it in practice, and Airbnb is really the platform to probably make it work.
Do you think part of it will be like a Ticketmaster 2.0 potentially?
It could be.
Yeah.
And once you get all these people looking to do things in the city, Like then all of a sudden you're like, you have the ability to sell them to concerts. You have the ability to get them buying their tours through the platform, even though they don't necessarily want to do that with their experiences. You have the maybe local soccer meetup and additional things that and people might want to do in that city. So yeah, it could really expand to anything that's happening in that market that you're going to book it through Airbnb, like you would your listing.
And Ticketmaster and Live Nation are so hated as consumer brands. It's sort of like, cable companies and banks and maybe Ticketmaster and Live Nation are probably in that category, that anything that has a lot more trust in the system may be able to do that. The last thing, we talked about monetizing through sponsored listings and ads. We already talked about that. And then last thing you said, leveraging data for personalization. This is sort of more tech and AI heavy. So talk about what you mean by that.
Yeah, and this gets into, and we talked a little bit with the serving ads. So the ability to, and one, yes, serve ads, but just in a much better way, connect. And they're going to start with listings and hosts. So what are the listings that would be perfect for that guest? And the profiles were the start of getting everyone to have the profile, getting everyone to move in app so they can sort of be understanding more and more about the guest. And then so they can really and start targeting you, serving you, giving you notifications on where you want to be traveling, what do you want to be doing, and when you're in market. And yeah, I think that just becomes the catalyst for all the things that Airbnb can be doing through AI once they know more and more about you. And once there's more and more things within their app that they can offer you. And it becomes like Amazon, where they're just serving you anything you'd want to buy. They know that you want to buy it before you want to buy it, and can serve you the ad. So if Airbnb is everything, and if Amazon is everything that's goods, and Airbnb's everything that's travel and services, it becomes the Amazon for what you want to do in sort of the physical world. And with how fast AI is evolving, like they've got to be on top of it, and they've got to know more about us to be able to do it well.
Yeah, and the backstory I think you know well is that Airbnb, Brian Chesky and Sam Altman are very close. They're very good friends. So Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, that company that owns ChatGPT. So they're very close, and in fact, in many ways, they're both mentors of each other. Sam Altman invested in Airbnb, and Brian Chesky has been helping Sam Altman think through how to navigate some of the political minefields, etc. So very incestuous, but very close in that in AI ecosystem. So they're very much on top of these AI developments themselves. So fascinating. Well, this is fascinating, Jamie. There's obviously a chance that none of it works.
A decent chance that none of it works. And Airbnb talks about and moving outside of their core. And I think why they talk about it so much is they haven't been able to move outside of their core. So it's still a huge unknown of whether they can move outside of shared spaces.
Yeah. Do you think, I know Brian he's been talking about the founder mode, the term came through his talk that he gave at Y Combinator. I have a feeling that his views on that in 2 years will be very different than what it is today. I just have that feeling. Some of it will require that type of sort of paranoia to be able to launch these things. Some of it will be letting go of some of that paranoia. Is what I feel, but that's just me personally, as of I guess founder to founder type thinking that I have.
Yeah, and maybe that's his thought of like, I let other people run these divisions in the past. We didn't see the success, so if I'm in the details and making sure that it gets launched in the right way, that we're thinking through all the downstream effects, that and bringing trust and into it from the beginning, that he's really involved, that it has a much higher chance of success. And I hope that's true.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jamie. I have a feeling that you and I will be talking in the future when they get to these new launches. And obviously we're going to dissect all of it through Skift on our news and research and our conferences as well. And obviously through talking to you as well. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.